Hello, I'm Daniela. I normally post slow stitching videos or different fabric techniques videos here on this channel, but occasionally I branch off into other creative areas, and that's exactly what I'm going to do today. Today's video, I'm going to show how to make a simple paper journal that's both useful and elegant. Now let me tell you how this came about. My sister, who lives on a different continent, is in charge of a group of kids for a wedding, and they'll be staying with her for a few days. She wanted to make about 8 to 10 journals, one for each child. And she wanted the journals to be simple so that the pages could either be written on or drawn on, depending on what the child happens to like. She also wanted it to be affordable. So I came up with a way to create these journals that she could do, replicating the techniques that I use with whatever materials she could find. These journals are made with copy paper, cardstock, and you can even use a file folder in place of a cardstock, or any type of folder. You just have to cut it apart. I use staples to bind it together, and then some tape to cover the staples and make it very interesting. Now I show two methods. Now the first method is a little bit easier and doesn't really involve much cutting or folding the paper. The second method involves folding the pages, and this allows the booklet to open flat. So there's a slight variation, even though the same materials are used. The end result is rather elegant, and I thought it would appeal to my sister. These journals are great for kids, but they'd also be great for adults as well. Just vary the paper according to the medium you're going to use. I use copy paper, just regular computer paper, in the journals for the kids, because this way they can write on them or draw on them as they see fit, using crayons or colored pencils or even pens. But if you knew you were going to do watercolor or mixed media, you can just use those papers instead. And really, there's a lot of variation that you can achieve. I use basic office supplies, a file folder and copy paper, a stapler and some tape, and I'll show you my process. It's very easy to modify, and very forgiving. So I came up with two types of journals made with the same supplies, the exact same supplies, just slightly modified. So this one is made, and I even included a little pocket, but that's completely optional. And it's made with the pages, and each of them are cut out, it's stapled together, and then there's just this tape around the edge, just so that the kids or the adults don't get poked by the staples. And when it opens, you can crease it, just like a book, like a paperback book, and it's very useful that way. Now it has the 8 pages, just like was requested. This one, though, is a little different in that the pages are just folded in half, so when the artist opens it to create their pages, it lies flat. I personally prefer this type, but this might be just fine as well. Now the beauty of it is they use the same supplies. The other beauty of it is you can make it in any size. Here I made one that has that center fold so it lays flat, and it's a cute little pocket notebook. And here's one that's a little larger, and this is the one that doesn't lay flat. You just fold the center down, but you get the same effect. It's a handy little notebook, and it's really quite attractive. I made one other one that opens flat, and I just used a file folder. You can use any type of folder. Basically, I wanted the cover to be a little more durable than the pages. Now for the pages, I just use copy paper, and it's rather inexpensive, it's great for drawing, and it's very handy. You could modify this if you wanted to use watercolor paper, or you wanted to use any different type of paper, cardstock, or even just recycling paper. You can use any of that. So let me show you how I make them. So you'll need your paper crafting supplies, and you don't need all of these. This is just what I'm going to use today, and there are certainly many modifications. Now I have a straight edge cutter here. I cut a lot of papers, so this is really handy. If you don't have it, you can use scissors just as easily, or we can even make it so that you really don't need very much cutting to do. I have a ruler, a pencil, and an eraser. I have these little binder clips. You can use clothespins. You don't even need them. It's just something that makes it a little nicer. When I'm creasing my paper, I use a bone folder, but you can use a credit card or even the edge of your fingernail. I have 2 staplers here. This is a nice stapler because it allows me to turn it and I can get into the seams, but it's not necessary. This little mini one that I buy every year, I usually buy them when the college supplies come out and the school supplies because it's so easy, actually cuts through more paper. It just doesn't have that neat little turning head. Then I have my paper scissors. The last thing I need is my paper, and then I'm going to use some decorative tape as well. So for my cover, I like cardstock. It's just a little heavier, and you could buy patterned paper just as easily. You'll only need one sheet for each cover. So this keeps it relatively inexpensive, especially if you're making a dozen journals. You can also use a file folder. And here's just the standard manila office file folder. I use that quite nicely, actually. It's great because this takes a lot of pencil and crayon and marker, and the kids will like to draw on it. But you can get fancy. They come in nice colors as well. For the paper to fill my journal, I just use copy paper. Now in some of my journals I use colored paper just because that's what I had. So just use what you like. And then I use some tape just to cover the staples. Now these are masking tapes, all the different colors that they come in, and this is a duct tape. You can use any tape you want. I just like to make sure that those little staples are covered. It just makes for a nicer experience. So now we'll get started making our journals. I like to start by choosing the size journal I want to make. So we'll make our first journal, and this one's going to be just with the standard paper. The paper itself is not going to be folded over, so I'm going to set aside my file folder for now. The reason I use the file folder for that one is because it folds and it's a nice big piece of cardstock. Just because it's easy, I'm going to use just the 8.5 by 11 papers, and that's going to be the paper for my journal. That's also the size that my cardstock is cut to. I like to have a piece of cardstock for the front and the back of the journal. It just gives it a little stability. So I went through my supplies, and I have some white cardstock here for the backing. You can use 2 pieces of your colored cardstock. I happen to just like difference between the front and the back. I think it makes it easier for the kids to know which way the journal is supposed to be set up. But it doesn't matter. You can use whatever cardstock or pages you have. So I have my copy paper, and these are going to be the pages of my book. So I'm going to choose 8 of them. So this part is very easy. I just take my 8 pages, set them down. I take my paper for the back and my paper for the front, and I just set it down. I'll square it up so that it's neat everywhere, and then I like to put a clip in the top and the bottom. And this is how I prepare it for the binding technique, and it's a very simple technique. All I do is I take my stapler and I go down the spine. Now in this case, if I staple it here, it will fold over and the pages will be tall. I could easily make a notebook where the pages are long, and maybe I'll just do that today. It gives the kids more area to color, and it makes for that crease less invasive. So again, I just move my clips, and I know I'm going to make the spine on the side here. Now you could measure out a neat line on the spine, but I'm just going to make my staples, and I just like to do 3 or 4. I just put them down and staple just a little ways in, maybe 1/4 of an inch, and I'll do as many as I think are necessary. I'll do maybe 1 more here. So there, basically, I have the book completely done. It's ready to go as a journal. I do like to cover this up because I don't want the kids just to get a little poked here. And even though it's not very bad, or actually at all, I like to cover it up anyway. So this is where I start my measuring. I take my ruler and my pencil, and I'll just measure maybe a 1/2 inch. A 1/2 inch seems pretty good. I just want to measure past the staples. Now I could have done this first before I put the staples in, but it really doesn't matter. It's a very forgiving technique. And then I just make a light pencil line on the area that is the spine. I'll come over here and take my tape, and I can choose any of these tapes that I want to use. I think I'll choose this white masking tape. So I just take that tape and I pull it across, eyeball it, so that it goes right along that line that we created, that spine. I'll set it down and I'll just gently press over it, just to burnish it. And then I can cut off the edge. Now I like to trim up the edges first. I may have to trim them up again. And then I fold it over. I can remove these clips because they're no longer necessary. Then I'll take my ruler again and I'll make another 1/2 inch mark right from the edge on this side. And then I'll just go and take my tape again and bind it. I'll fold it over again, burnish it well, and I can always add more tape if I want. I'll just trim the edges so that my journal is nice and neat. So before my journal is complete, and it looks very neat now, I like to make the folds just so that the journal is ready to go and the kids aren't discouraged from creating inside of it. So I start by folding the front and the back, just gently and neatly coaxing the paper down. And then I'll just go to the center, make that nice neat fold, and I could do this on all the pages. I just want to make sure that the journal is very friendly for the kids to work on. Then after I have all the pages complete, that is one way to make a journal. Now I want to show you how I make the journal using the file folder, and this uses folded pages instead of just the already cut to size pages. So now I have my file folder for my cover and my pages. What I like to do is take the pages, and again I'm just using copy pages, but you can start with any size page you want. And I'm just going to fold them in half. Now it's only 4 pages, so I can fold them all together all at once. If I had any more than 8 pages, I would break them up and fold them in smaller groups. But for this process, folding right in half is perfect. Then I'll just take my pages and I hold it right up against the spine or the fold of that file folder. I don't even have to measure it, although you certainly could. I just take the paper and I just make a little mark, just a little bit larger, a little longer than the edge of the paper, only because I like my cover to be just a little bit longer. And then I'll make that same mark over here. So I'll take my file folder and my cutter, and now I'll cut on those marks. Now for this technique, I use 1 file folder for each journal. If you wanted to, you could make your books smaller and get 2 covers from each file folder. So now I have my pages. I'll double check that they fit inside my journal. And they do. And now I need to bind it, which again, I'm going to use my stapler for that. So I like to hold my papers down at right angles, and then I can take my clips and hold the pages right in place. And this secures it so that the pages are nice and neat right in the fold. Now from here, I'll take my stapler and staple right inside this binding. I like to staple so that it's smooth on the inside, and again, my little exterior of the staple is on the outside. This way it's just safer for the kids when they're actually drawing inside the journal. Now this is where this stapler comes in handy, because I can turn it like this and it fits in quite nicely, and I can just make my staple to start binding it. With these staplers and other staplers, it will fit straight on but not parallel to that line. So I'll open the stapler and make sure I have a surface underneath the booklet that can protect the surface from that staple. So I'll just hold the stapler up here, press down, and pull it up. If it doesn't work, and I don't like the way this worked, I'll just make 2 holes and take a fresh staple and manually insert it. So if that doesn't work, you can just take a staple, poke the holes in your book, and I'm just going to use the holes that exist from my failed attempt. And now I'll just insert those staple legs into those holes. From there, I can flip this piece over, and then using either a credit card or in this case the bone folder, I'll just press down the staples so it manually seals. So that's another way that you can attach your staple if your stapler doesn't turn around like this. So now I have my journal, and now I want to just tidy it up here and make sure that those edges are nice and neat. So I'll do the same procedure where I take my ruler and I'll measure. Now on the file folder there is a line here. I can always just follow that line, but I don't mind measuring. I'm going to make a little 1/2 inch mark on the top and the bottom. Lightly sketch it. And then I'll add my tape. So this is just colored masking tape that I'm using. You can use masking tape, duct tape, any tape you can find. The key with any of the tapes is just to take it slow and really burnish it, just to make sure there's a nice adhesion. And then I just flip it over and burnish it again. I'll trim up the edges. And I like to do one more layer just on that spine. Now the spine doesn't do anything. It protects the edge, but it's not necessary because as you can see, the journal opens flat. It is a nice decorative element and it does protect from the staples. So I'm just going to go over the existing area where I put the tape already. I'm not even going to create the line. Now at this point your journal is complete and it's ready to go. If you have a corner rounder, this is a nice time to do that if that's what you like. And I happen to like the edges rounded. So I'll just punch all the edges of the cover, the back, and the paper. So there I have my booklet that opens flat. So here are the 2 booklets that we made. We have the booklet where it's stapled on the edge just using copy paper, so it's a quicker method, but it creates a really lovely book. And we have the book made with folded pages that opens flat. If you want to add a pocket to your book, you just have to make sure that your cover paper is long enough to make that pocket. And I'll show you how I do that really quickly. So if I wanted to use this 8.5 by 11 paper, and it doesn't matter what size you use, but whatever size you use, you just have to make sure that your cover paper is longer so that you could make that fold. So here I have my 8.5 by 11 paper and I have a piece of 12 by 12 paper. I'm just going to make a mark right here on my paper so that I know the depth of my fold. And then I can turn it over and just fold that paper, make a nice crease right on that mark. I can take my bone folder and just sharpen that crease. I'll trim the paper down on the edge, but after I bind it, I'll have a little pocket on the front page. So now my journal is ready to be bound and it has that pocket. What I like to do is just take a piece of double-sided tape, set it right at the edge of that pocket, and then burnish it closed. So then when my journal is bound, there'll be a little pocket here to tuck in extra papers and such. And this is what it looks like on one that's already complete. So I have my journal and a little spot to tuck something special.
So that's how I create those journals. One lays flat and one lays open with a bend, just a little crease. They're both very easy to use and they're great for either being written in or drawn in.
If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. Thanks for joining me today.